Some cars are so over-engineered, so insanely complicated, that even the best mechanics struggle to keep them running. But that's what makes them special. Today I'll show you 13 of the most complex cars ever built, machines that pushed engineering to its absolute limits. And you won't believe what number 7 had to do just to start the engine. Starting off at number 13 is the 1992 to 2002 Mazda RX-7 FD, automotive engineering's beautiful problem. Instead of conventional pistons, the RX-7 uses a 13B REW twin-turbocharged rotary engine, essentially triangular rotors spinning in elliptical chambers. Mazda's engineers nicknamed these engines spinning triangles of doom during development, half-jokingly. This 1.3-liter engine produces a remarkable 255 horsepower. That's nearly 200 horsepower per liter in the early 1990s, when most cars were happy to get half that. But that sequential twin-turbo system. At low RPMs, only one turbocharger works. As you accelerate past 4,500 RPM, the second turbo kicks in. Great in theory, but this transition requires a symphony of vacuum lines, solenoids, and actuators working in perfect harmony. When one piece fails, and they do, diagnosing which part is tough. And don't get me started on the Apex seals. Mazda officially rated them for 80,000 miles. But in reality, even perfectly maintained ones go at 30,000, and abused ones last over 100,000. The cooling system is another masterpiece of complexity. The FD has separate cooling systems for the engine, oil, and twin turbos, with 2 radiators, an oil cooler, and a complex network of sensors and thermostats. Today, these RX-7s command $30,000 to $70,000 for good examples, with pristine low-mileage cars pushing 100,000. At number 12 is the 1957 to 1959 Ford Fairlane 500 Skyliner, Detroit's first mechanical magic trick. Before computers were managing our cars, these mad scientists at Ford were building a hardtop that would fold itself into the trunk. The mechanism was insanity on wheels. We're talking about 610 feet of wiring, enough to circle a basketball court 7 times. Controlling a system of 10 power relays, 10 limit switches, 4 lock motors, and 3 drive motors. And remember, this was the 1950s technology. No microprocessors, no logic boards, just pure mechanical and electrical engineering, using relays the size of cigarette packs. This retraction sequence took 25 seconds. The trunk lid opened backward, the hardtop separated, folded, and tucked neatly into the trunk. What made this especially complex wasn't just the mechanism, but the tolerances. The roof panels had to align perfectly when closed. We're talking gaps measured in millimeters, or you'd get wind noise and water leaks. And this was in an era when most car doors needed a good slam to close properly. The Y-block V8 engines, either a 292 or 332 cubic incher, weren't anything special for the era, putting out between 212 and 243 horsepower, but they needed to be stout because the roof mechanism added nearly 400 pounds to the car's weight. Ford built fewer than 21,000 Skyliners over 3 years before abandoning the idea. Today, Skyliners fetch $40,000 to $70,000 for running examples, and upwards of $150,000 for concourse-level restorations. Number 11 brings us to the 1991 to 1998 Mercedes-Benz W140, the S-Class that even Mercedes engineers admit went too far. Everything about it was complex. Those doors, which featured soft close technology, close them partway and motors would automatically pull them shut. The same applied to the trunk. The first-gen system was so sensitive that it would occasionally trigger while driving, causing the door to suddenly re-secure itself mid-journey. Double-paned windows with complex sealing mechanisms isolated passengers from the peasant noises of the outside world so effectively that Mercedes had to add a parking antenna that extended only when needed, because drivers couldn't hear what they were backing into. This was also the first Mercedes with electronic stability control, adaptive dampening suspension, and electronic brake pressure distribution. Under the hood, engine options included a massive 6.0-liter V12 producing 389 horsepower, controlled by two separate engine computers working in harmony. The climate control system used 16 different electric motors and enough ductwork to ventilate a small office building. Even the windshield wipers were complex, with articulated arms and speed-sensitive operation that adjusted based on vehicle speed, and, I kid you not, the ambient temperature and moisture content of the outside air. Today, you can pick up a W140 for $10,000 to $25,000. Which seems like a bargain for a car that cost over $100,000 new, equivalent to about $195,000 today. Number 10 on our list is the 2007 to 2017 Lexus LS 600H, Toyota's first attempt at convincing the world that hybrid technology belonged in the executive parking lot. The 5.0-liter V8 engine paired with high-output electric motors for a combined 438 horsepower, all while achieving emissions ratings 70% better than its competitors. What made this beast such a nightmare was the insanely complicated marriage of that thundering V8 with the electric components. They weren't content with just making a hybrid. Oh no, they had to integrate the whole system with an all-wheel drive setup that had engineers pulling their hair out during development. The transmission alone was a masterclass in overthinking, using a complex power split device that essentially worked as both CVT and fixed gear system simultaneously. The air suspension was another piece of work. Each wheel had individual air springs that communicated with a central computer that made millions of calculations per second just to decide if your butt should feel a pothole. And when something went wrong, good luck finding a mechanic outside the dealership who'd even pop the hood. These days you can snag one for 15 to 30 grand, but that first $10,000 repair bill will remind you why they depreciated so quickly. At number 9 is the rare 1995 to 1996 Mitsubishi 3000 GT VR4 Spider. Only 877 of these ever hit the streets, and there's a damn good reason for that. Mitsubishi decided to take their already complex 3000 GT VR4, which was stuffed with all-wheel drive, all-wheel steering, active aero, and electronic suspension, and then said, you know what this needs? A power-folding metal hardtop in the mid-90s. The retractable roof alone had 17 moving parts and motors. When you hit that roof button, you were essentially asking 1990s electronics to perform a mechanical ballet that would still be impressive today. The twin-turbo V6 was pushing 320 horses through a drivetrain that was sending power everywhere, while the ECU was trying to manage active aerodynamics that adjusted at speed. There were literally motors controlling flaps and spoilers while computers decided how much each wheel should steer. All this technology was being controlled by electronics from an era when reliable meant might not catch fire this week. Find one today and you'll shell out 30 to 60 grand for the privilege of becoming personal friends with every specialty mechanic in a 100-mile radius. At number 8, we find automotive royalty, the 1963 to 1981 Mercedes-Benz 600. This was the preferred transport of everyone from Lenin to literal dictators. And once you understand the engineering, you understand why it became the ultimate status symbol. The heart of the madness was a hydraulic system pressurized to 3,200 psi, enough to literally inject hydraulic fluid through your skin if a line ruptured. This wasn't powering just the usual suspects like suspension. This liquid pressure network controlled everything. Windows, seats, sunroof, trunk, doors, all hydraulic. Even the damn door locks used hydraulic pressure where a simple key mechanism would do. The windows alone would close with enough force to remove fingers, which I guess was a feature if you were Idi Amin. The M100 6.3-liter V8 was just the appetizer. The self-leveling suspension was so complex that adjustments required special tools and training even Mercedes dealers rarely had. When these systems fail today, and they will, you're basically sending blank checks to one of maybe 5 specialists worldwide who can actually fix them. There's a reason these things range from $50,000 for a basket case to north of $300,000 for a pristine example. They represent a level of over-engineering we'll never see again, and frankly, that's probably for the best. Number 7 brings us to one of the strangest automotive marriages in history, the 1970 to 1975 Citroën SM. This car was born when Citroën purchased Maserati in 1968, giving them access to a compact, powerful V6 engine. This 2.7-liter, later 3.0-liter Maserati V6 produced 170 horsepower and could push the SM to over 140 miles per hour, making it one of the fastest front-wheel drive cars of its era. But the company mounted the engine way back behind the front axle for better weight distribution, which meant the accessory belt setup became a service nightmare that required special tools just to change simple components. The hydro-pneumatic suspension was essentially sentient. Using a combination of hydraulic fluid and nitrogen gas spheres, the system could raise, lower, and level the car automatically. Let's not forget the Duravi variable assist power steering. This system was so strange that even seasoned drivers had to recalibrate their brains. It provided almost no resistance at parking speeds, but progressively firmed up as velocity increased. More bizarre was its self-centering feature that would aggressively return the wheel to center like it was possessed. The steering wheel had just 2 turns, lock to lock, giving the SM the directional change capability of a fighter jet with about as much intuitive feel. Production lasted just 5 years, with fewer than 13,000 built. Today, these Franco-Italian oddities command around $40,000. Before we continue, if you're enjoying the list so far, drop a like, comment, and maybe even subscribe. That helps a ton and keeps the content coming. Breaking into the top 6 is the 1955 to 1975 Citroën DS. Before the SM, there was the DS, the DS, or Goddess, and my god, was this thing a revolution on wheels. When Citroën unveiled it in 1955, it might as well have been a UFO landing at the Paris Motor Show. Nothing, and I mean nothing, about this car followed conventional automotive wisdom of the time. While everyone else was using metal springs, Citroën built a high-pressure hydraulic network that controlled suspension, steering, braking, and transmission functions through a single interconnected system. The car would literally rise up from its resting position when you started it, like it was coming alive. On the road, it floated over surfaces that would shake other cars to pieces. The braking system was completely alien to anything before it. Instead of a conventional pedal linked to hydraulic cylinders, the DS featured a mushroom-shaped button on the floor that responded to pressure, not travel. Apply slight pressure and you'd get gentle braking. Push harder and the system would progressively increase force automatically. Its aerodynamic design was so far ahead of its time that it still looks futuristic even today. The height adjustment was genuinely useful. These days, $30,000 might get you a project car, while pristine examples command 6 figures. Number 5 on the list is the 1976 to 1990 Aston Martin Lagonda, the 4-door wedge of automotive insanity that tried to digitize the automotive experience before computers were actually ready for prime time. For the Series 2 models, Aston decided that conventional gauges and switches were for peasants. Instead, they created the world's first digital dashboard and touch-sensitive controls in 1976. Let that sink in. This was technology that barely existed in laboratories, let alone production vehicles. The cathode ray tube displays and capacitive touch panels were developed in partnership with Cranefield Institute of Technology and cost more than the entire development budget of most cars of the era. All these electronics were being installed in a hand-built British luxury car from the 70s. The Lagonda's dashboard would routinely go completely dark, display random information, or just melt down entirely. The wiring harness was another special kind of hell. Early cars had over 150 individual fuses and relays. Documentation was so poor that technicians often had to trace wires physically through the car's structure to find faults. Production was painfully slow, with just 645 units built over 14 years. Each car required around 2,200 hours to build, and probably twice that in service time over its life. Today, these rolling monuments to over-ambition fetch between $50,000 for basket cases to over $120,000 for properly sorted examples. At number 4 is the 2002 to 2016 Volkswagen Phaeton, VW's most spectacular middle finger to the established luxury order. The entire car was built around Ferdinand Piëch's infamous 10 parameters, including the ability to cruise all day at 186 miles per hour in 122-degree Fahrenheit heat, while maintaining a 72-degree Fahrenheit interior. Seriously, they used 25 separate servo motors just to manage airflow through hidden dampers and channels. The system was so complex that when the 4-zone climate control had issues, dealers would often replace entire control units rather than diagnose the labyrinth of components. The wiring complexity was next-level insanity. Most luxury cars of that era had maybe 20 to 30 electronic control units. The Phaeton, over 100 separate ECUs networked together. The W12 engine option was essentially two VR6 engines joined at a 72-degree angle, a configuration so complex it required a specialized assembly line just for that component. And they somehow crammed this monster into a relatively conventional-looking sedan that most people mistook for a Passat on growth hormones. These technological masterpieces now trade for $15,000 to $30,000, less than a basic Golf. Breaking into the top 3 is the 2013 to 2015 McLaren P1. What makes this car such a technological monster isn't just the numbers. Though 903 combined horsepower from a 3.8-liter V8 and electric motor is certifiably insane. It's the integration of race tech that had never before made it to the street. The energy recovery system was lifted directly from F1 development, with problematic programming. The active aerodynamic package is otherworldly. The rear wing doesn't just deploy, it actively changes its angle of attack based on driver inputs, speed, and cornering forces. When you hit the brakes hard, it goes vertical, adding over 600 kilograms of downforce. The carbon fiber tub was a structural revolution. McLaren developed a new carbon layup process called RTM, or resin transfer molding, that allowed for more complex carbon structures while reducing weight. The entire passenger cell weighed just 90 kilograms, but could withstand forces that would tear conventional supercars apart. Current values range from $1.5 to $2.5 million, making the original $1.15 million price tag seem almost reasonable. And that's if you can find an owner willing to part with one. There are only 375 of these ever made. At number 2, it might be the most innovative approach to hypercar design ever attempted. The 2016 to 2025 Koenigsegg Regera. This car is such a unicorn because of its direct drive system. Let me explain how revolutionary this is. There's no traditional gearbox. None. Zero. In a 1,500-plus horsepower hypercar. Instead, the 5.0-liter twin-turbo V8 is connected to the wheels through a hydraulic coupling and a fixed final drive. The coupling slips at low speeds like a torque converter and then locks up as you gain velocity. This elimination of the transmission seems insane until you understand how it works with the 3 electric motors in the hybrid system. One motor on each rear wheel and one on the crankshaft work together to fill the torque gaps you'd normally need multiple gears for. The result is a single-speed hypercar that can both pull away smoothly from a standstill and hit 250+ miles per hour without ever changing gears. The battery system is equally innovative, an 800-volt system that can discharge at up to 525 kilowatts and recharge at 200 kilowatts. To manage the immense heat generated by this system, Koenigsegg developed direct liquid cooling for the battery cells, allowing them to handle charge and discharge rates that would melt conventional battery packs. Production is limited to 80 units, each costing around $2 to $3 million. I think it's actually rewriting the formula for what a hypercar's driving experience should be. Alright, our complexity crown goes to the 2005 to 2015 Bugatti Veyron. The numbers have become automotive legend. 8.0-liter W16 engine with 4 turbochargers. 1,001 horsepower when 500 was still considered insane. Top speed of 253 miles per hour, and when most supercars were struggling to break 200. But what those numbers don't tell you is the sheer insanity required to make them possible. The Veyron has 10, yes, 10 radiators. 3 for the engine cooling, 1 for the transmission oil, 1 for the differential oil, 1 for the engine oil, 2 for the air-to-liquid intercoolers, and 2 more for the air conditioning. When running at full tilt, the Veyron processes more air per minute than a human breathes in 4 days. The 7-speed dual-clutch transmission was developed specifically for the Veyron, as no existing transmission could handle the torque. The all-wheel drive system used a Haldex coupling that could vary torque split between axles in milliseconds. Even the tires represent peak complexity, developed specifically for the Veyron by Michelin. Each tire costs around $10,000, and a complete set must be replaced every 2,500 miles. Maintenance is where the Veyron truly humbles its owner. An oil change costs $21,000 because you need to partially disassemble the car to access all the systems. A full service runs around $50,000. And yet, Volkswagen Group reportedly lost money on every single one they sold despite the $1.5 to $3 million price tag. How ironic. And that's a wrap. Which of these insanely complex cars impressed you the most? Or would you rather stick to something a little easier to fix? Let me know in the comments below. Before you go, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you want more, click on our other videos. You won't be disappointed. Thanks for watching.